my name is Ani Baker, and I am a teacher turned documentary filmmaker living in Los Angeles. So 2020 has been really scary, and I, like you, probably went through 2 to 3 months of panic and loss and fear and crying. And eventually, when my emotions started to level out and I got my head back above water, I remembered that the events of 2020 were drastically and rapidly affecting people in every country all over the world. And that got me so curious to find out what the events of 2020 have been like for other people elsewhere. So that's what I'm doing with this series, is I am traveling around the world, so to speak, to get other vantage points. These conversations I've had with people have taught me so much, and they've made me feel really connected, and I hope that they will do both of those things for you too. In episode 4, we go to Alberta, Canada to talk with Terrence Adams about what it's been like in Canada this year. Canada is a country that, especially for Americans, we idealize in a lot of ways because we see them as having a culture of kindness, and also they have universal health care, and we're jealous of that. Before our talk, I had read that Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, right after labeling COVID-19 a global pandemic, immediately announced a $1 billion fund for COVID-19 research and a stimulus package called the Canada Emergency Response Benefit, which would give impacted Canadians $2,000 a month. We didn't only talk about COVID and quarantine, we also talked about the Black Lives Matter movement and how that has impacted Canada, and we got really, really honest about the tolls that this year has taken on both of our mental health. I hope that you enjoy this glimpse into what 2020 has been like in Canada. So when did lockdown start for you, where you are?
For me, it started March 13th. I'm a university student, and March 13th was the day when classes got canceled. That was a Friday, I believe, and then the Monday after that, then all the schools K-12 got canceled, and we all went full lockdown.
So before that, before you went full lockdown, what did your day-to-day life look like?
I would wake up, take 2 buses and the train to university, do my classes, and then come back home, eat something, and then I would go to Taekwondo and Jiu-Jitsu, and I would either go to class or I would teach my class, and then I'd come home, do homework, and then just keep cycling through it.
Since lockdown, sorry to ask this question, but what does your day-to-day life look like now?
My sleep schedule is terrible. It's just gone completely out the window. When I still had school, I had a couple of professors that had no idea how to transfer their stuff online. They had no idea how to teach online. I just finished my first year. I was stuck with some of the professors who usually just teach grad classes, and then they were stuck with first year classes, so they normally don't teach at all.
Got it.
And then with my martial arts, that got shut down for about a month and a half, and then they figured out how to do it online.
Really?
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about that. What does that look like?
Yes. So we do it on Zoom.
Okay.
And it started off where it was just online, and now we have a little bit that's in person. But for the just online part, it's on Zoom. You sign in, everyone's there. You just clear out a space in your basement, and then whoever's instructing teaches the class in a way so that you can do everything basically stationary.
And you teach some of those classes?
Yeah, I haven't done a whole lot of teaching. I did a couple classes, but since I teach the kids classes, COVID has completely decimated our children's program. There's so many people have just pulled their kids out of Taekwondo because they can't get their kids to focus on the online classes, and or parents lost their jobs, can't afford it. And so I'll be getting back into teaching once everything goes back to normal.
I relate to that with the, you know, I was working, well, I taught until 2016 in the school system, and then have worked with kids sporadically. And the kiddo that I was working with right when lockdown started, he's nonverbal. I have to be right next to him. Like it's a very like interactive process, you know, and I talked to his family when everything went down. Like, I mean, I guess we can try to do some sort of discounted rate and over Zoom. And we all just decided like, it's not a thing. It's not possible. And then I know like I'm working with a kiddo now, and my friends have kids, and just like, they have gone that same route. They're just like, we can't get them in front of the computer every day. It's such a nightmare. It's like a nightmare to even get through an hour. Just forget it. They're just gonna like miss all this time, which is such a bummer. And I'm sure you miss it. Don't you miss like teaching?
Oh, I miss my kids so much.
Yeah.
We have like a modified children's class that's online, since we have way less students. But I also was teaching our special needs program, and that one's just been completely shut down, which is so sad because I love those kids so much. And it's such an interesting challenge to change martial arts in a way so that it's accessible for everyone.
Oh, that's so incredible. It's also so beneficial for kids with special needs. That's the population of kids I worked with. And one of my kiddos, he was in martial arts, and he would come into the class every day and be like, look what I learned. And he'd do like roundhouse kicks and stuff. And it really boosted his self-esteem, his self-confidence. He had dyspraxia, so it was like hard for him to like use his limbs. So being challenged in that way was like so wonderful. You're doing the Lord's work. That's great. It's funny to talk to somebody from Canada because we have such an idealized view of your country and healthcare, and it is a lot better than it is here. So I'm just gonna like ask you some questions about the day-to-day. So with COVID right now, what does lockdown look like? Is everything still closed? Do people wear their masks when they're asked to? What's the general population's consensus on what's going on?
Okay, so I'm in Alberta, which is like the redneck part of Canada.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Yeah, and so right now we're in phase 2 of reopening.
Okay.
So when we were in full lockdown, everything was closed. You were allowed to go outside, but that was basically it. But there was no real enforcement of it, just everything was closed and there was nowhere to go. Then as we were reopening, right now we're allowed groups of 50 people. Stores are open, some restaurants are open, but all with limited capacity. And you don't have to wear your mask, but it's strongly suggested that you do, and most people do.
Interesting. You don't have to, but most people still do.
Yeah, because we all know that masks don't really protect us, but they protect other people, and so it's just kind of common courtesy to wear a mask now and make sure that you have hand sanitizer, and to like dance around people to make sure you're social distance as best you can.
How do the residents in Alberta typically feel about Trudeau? How do you feel about Trudeau? How do you feel like he is handling this situation specifically?
Because I'm from Edmonton, and so in our last provincial election, we had 2 parties, the Conservative Party and the NDP. The NDPs are like, they're very liberal, all for environmental regulation and collectivism, and then we have the Conservatives, individualism, less taxes, less social programs.
Yeah.
Edmonton was almost completely NDP.
Okay.
Like every single person in Edmonton, like majority was NDP. The rest of Alberta, it was just a sea of blue, so much conservative. So then we now have them in power. They don't love Trudeau because they're all about pipelines and expanding the oil industry, right, and all that stuff that is not sustainable in the least.
Right.
If you work in the oil industry, you don't really like Trudeau.
Okay.
And then if you're super left, you also don't love Trudeau because he's not doing enough.
Okay.
But I personally, I think he's okay. He's trying his best. We've had much worse people in power. The way that he's been on top of keeping everyone informed and making sure that everyone knows that the federal government is here to support everyone, and the student payments that he put out,
yeah,
awesome. So there's the unemployment one, and then there's the student one, and then there's a student summer job program. So he's doing his best to make sure that all the youth stay employed and able to stay in school.
Is the student payment the $2,000 a month?
The student payment is $1,250 a month.
Okay.
And then the unemployment one is $2,000 a month.
Wow. And you, as a student, qualify for one but not both, or both? Because you were teaching martial arts, so.
Yeah. So you can only apply for one or the other.
Okay.
But I applied for the unemployment one because it's more money.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it's really nice to know that I have that safety net and that I'll be able to pay for school next year, no problem.
Yeah, absolutely. Are you finding that you're making more on unemployment?
Only because I was working part-time.
Okay.
If I was working full-time, I would have been making more money, but it's a good in-between payment for part-time versus full-time to try to just give people enough to live comfortably.
Sure. So tell me a little bit about, you went into partial lockdown and then the next week you were in full lockdown. How did you interpret what was going on immediately? What were your thoughts about it? What did you think was about to happen? What did you think was happening?
It felt like I was in a young adult dystopian novel. Like everything was just shut down and I was like, this is the apocalypse. I better get canned beans.
Yeah. That's what they do, right? Yeah, I know.
Yeah. It went from COVID was just other people have it, we don't have it, to all of a sudden it's in Alberta, it's in Edmonton, you can't go to school, you can't leave your home.
What is it like to have free healthcare there? Like, so if you know that if you contract COVID, you can go and get the help that you need and not come out of the hospital with a lifetime or maybe multiple lifetimes worth of debt, does that at all make you feel a little bit safer? Like knowing I'm going to try not to get this virus, but if I do, I know I'm going to have care? Or is it still just terrifying because you don't know what the virus would do to you?
The terrifying part is mostly if I don't want to transfer it to my family and people I'm around during the incubation period before I show symptoms. I'm not worried at all about hospital bills or anything, and it's so alien to me that anyone would have to be worried about that. And I'm disgusted by the healthcare in the United States, because if I get COVID, all I have to worry about is making sure that I keep other people safe best I can, and then I know that whatever hospital I end up in is going to take care of me to the best of their abilities.
At the depths of lockdown, right? Like, what did a day look like and feel like for you?
It felt like years of therapy were slowly unraveling.
Yes, that is the best way to put it. Yes, I remember I had a day where I was like crying and saying and feeling things that I hadn't felt since high school.
Yeah, like I like reverted back to my junior high self at times, and I was like, I have not been in this headspace in years.
So I'm so fascinated about that, because when I had my meltdown that took me back to high school, I had my boyfriend next to me being like, it's quarantine, you're in quarantine, these feelings aren't real, right? But they were, if it weren't for having that voice, I would have just been like, oh, I'm just lost again. I'm back to being that bad again, because those feelings were mine at a time and they were really familiar. And it was hard for me to go, oh, this must be about quarantine, because they were feelings I had had before, not during quarantine.
Yeah, they were so familiar.
Yeah.
And I knew that they were there, and they were like these weird, terrible old friends that just randomly decided to come and stay with me for a while.
And fuck things up. Make a big mess. Yeah. That's so fascinating. Okay, so were you able to, or did you have support from others?
It's been kind of an up and down process, where I'll be doing really good, and I'm like, I have time, I can be creative, I can do all these projects, I can read all these books, and then all of a sudden it just hits me that I don't know how long this is going to be. I don't know what my future is going to look like. I don't know when I'm going to be able to go back to work. I don't know how school's going to look. I have no idea if I'm ever going to be able to travel again. I have no idea how to save money in this time period. And then it just immediately dropped. And then I have good weeks and I have bad weeks. I live with my family, and also I'm lucky enough that my family and my boyfriend's family are pretty close, and so we've been able to go back and forth between the two houses, and so we haven't interacted with anyone else outside of those two houses. And so he's been very supportive and good at being a grounding presence.
Right.
He wasn't there in junior high, so
okay.
Yeah. And so it's a good reminder just to bring me back to the present. And a very good reminder to just take each day one step at a time and not worry too much about the future, because there's no way to plan.
Yeah. I know it kind of I remember when it first started, I was like, hey, I retired in 2016 and I took a year off. I know what it's like to not have stuff to do. I can fill my day up. I can make a schedule. But the difference is exactly what you just said. We don't know how long this is going to take. So it's like, it disables you from being able to make a concrete plan and then work toward it, because it's like, in the back of your head, I could get rolling on this thing and then have to abruptly stop. How much energy, how much of myself do I want to pour into this new schedule that I have no idea when it's going to also evaporate, just like everything else just evaporated.
Yeah, exactly. It's kind of annoying because I know that I have the capability to do all these new things that I've been planning on doing, but I'm too scared to do them for exactly the reason that you said, is I don't know if I'm going to have to stop.
Yeah, and a teacher friend of mine reminded me of the hierarchy of needs, and it's something that I was taught about in school when I was, becoming an educator, because it helps you understand when a kid is able to get to the next level. And just revisiting that triangle, it's like the first 4 foundational elements have been stripped from all of us, and then there's self-actualization, there's like motivation and stuff toward the top. Well, you can't get there if you don't have a job and you don't have stable housing anymore and you don't have your basic needs met. And I needed that, though, because I went through the same thing you did, where I was like, all right, got a lot of time. How come I can't do anything? And then it's like, oh, right, because our basic needs have been taken away abruptly, no end in sight. We don't have any information. There's panic everywhere. This isn't a space to create from, to make
exactly
from. Yeah. It's lack in every way that's sort of just like been put on us, And
at first I found it entertaining because I'm a bit of an introvert, and I was like, oh, I get to spend time at home. This is great. And then I found myself just craving presence from other people. I didn't want to talk to people. I just wanted to be around people.
You're the second person who said that you just missed, like, even just being silent in a room with someone else.
Yeah. Like, I just wanted to go to a coffee shop and sit down and just be around a whole bunch of people sharing a space.
Yeah. Do you find that you and your boyfriend trade off strong days and sort of like weaker days? Or is he pretty...
Yeah, for sure. And it's beneficial because when one of us is down, then the other one, we usually have like more energy, and then we can help bring each other up. And then there's been a couple times where we've intersected on low days, and then at that point we just kind of give each other space and then try to work together to come up with something to do, even if that's just like going for a walk for half an hour.
Yeah.
Not talking to each other, but just going outside so that there's a change of scenery.
Yeah. Have you been able to get more in touch with just how impacted you are by minor, even changes in scenery?
Yeah. It's amazing what even like changing the lighting in a room can do.
Yeah. And I don't think it's something that we had to pay attention to before, but I had a day, one of my worst days, like I did not get out of bed at all until like 6:30 p.m. I also was hungover because the night before I had like drank a whole bottle of wine by myself. It was like one of the low quarantine days.
Yeah.
I had a headache all day. My headache was so bad. I was like, just go and get ibuprofen. Couldn't even get out of bed for that. 6:30 rolled around. I got like a video message from my friend, and I was like, you know what? I'm getting out of bed. And I went outside And it was like, I feel so, not that I was better or cured or, you know, like not sad anymore, but the shift was marked and monumental in just my state of being. And it's like, wow, it's incredible to have the space to notice how much we are affected by light, like you said, by air, by sunlight, by, you know, the opposite of that.
Yeah, it's so weird that like the smell of the room I'm in can completely change my mindset.
I'm curious about what it's been like in Alberta. You said it's like a redneck area, okay?
Yeah.
So tell me about the politics of your area. Tell me about how the Black Lives Matter movement specifically has shown up in Alberta.
So shortly after the protests started in the States, we had a rally at our provincial legislature, and it was very peaceful. The problem we have is that our terrible premier passed a bill called Bill 1, which essentially makes it illegal to protest on essential infrastructure. Essential infrastructure is very vague.
It's arbitrary, so they get to go, oh, that's essential infrastructure, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and so basically if you are on a road protesting something, they're legally allowed to arrest you.
Come on.
And the reason that came up was because there were loads of people protesting pipelines because it was going through Indigenous lands. Because in Canada, our police brutality is focused more heavily on our Indigenous population. Because our RCMP was created to enforce keeping Indigenous people on their reserves and out of certain areas. Because of course we did have racism towards Black people, but our primary racism is towards First Nations. Wow. And so we had a Black Lives Matter rally. It went really well. It was beautiful. We were in a park and there were people going around handing out masks and hand sanitizer. We were trying to make it as safe as possible. Of course, we had one of our like 6 white supremacist groups come in during our when we all took a knee and we're having a moment of silence for George Floyd. They started yelling, but nothing broke out really. They were trying to start a fight, but all of us who were supporting Black Lives Matter, we just ignored them, let them run out their energy. And then we've been sort of jumping off the US to push for police reform in our own country, specifically for Indigenous and Black population, so the BIPOC community. Yeah.
You said one of 6 white supremacist groups. I don't mean to put you on the spot, like name all 6, but what do you mean by that?
Okay, so we got the KKK, and then we have this one called the Sons of Odin.
Yeah, okay.
And then there's another one called Proud Boys.
Okay.
And then there's a couple other ones. There's like the Yellow Jackets.
Okay.
Or the Yellow Vests, I think. But no one really takes them seriously because they're small, they're angry, and they're not respected. But they're still there and they're still taking up space and they're still interrupting other people's groups and they're still inciting violence. And so the federal government is actually trying to push to call white supremacist groups terrorism groups. So then we can get CSIS involved, which is our CIA thing, so that we can get them taken care of. But of course, because of COVID, that's kind of taken a back burner, and so it's harder to get that done. But since Alberta is a pretty redneck province, there's quite a bit of white supremacy and climate change deniers and anti-vaxxers. Edmonton is a bit different though, because Edmonton's very liberal, and so we don't have as many of those groups in our city, but I know that they're in the province and I know of them and I know I've seen them. I went to the legislature the other day to take some photos of my friends for their grad, and there was this group there and they were just yelling about white lives matter and the government is taking away our rights, and there were only like 20 of them there.
Ha!
and there were so many high school kids there taking their grad photos, and all of us just kind of like interrupted their meeting and just walked straight through it because they were just saying all this bullshit, and it was just entertaining. Like, we laughed at them.
Were you raised in Alberta?
Yeah.
I was raised in a very redneck area too, super conservative, lots of Trump signs on lawns there at this point in time. I mean, it's like Trump's in power now, but it felt like where I was from, Trump was always in power. It was that type of place, you know?
Right, yeah.
And I got the fuck out of there, but I wasn't able to get out until I was like 21, 22. Do you daydream about that? Leaving?
Oh, yeah. Our provincial government right now, they took all of the money that was saved for pensions for our healthcare workers and invested it into oil.
Oh, God. Come on.
And then they were trying to do the same thing with teachers.
Cool.
And my mom's a teacher, and then my boyfriend's mom is a healthcare worker.
Oh, my God.
Both our families just hate the government. We all voted NDP because we like what they were standing for. But we're stuck with the Conservatives.
There's been a shift in morale. There's a different energy in the air here now. Has that made its way to you? I know the conversation is different, but what does it feel like?
Particularly on social media, the mood has shifted. Because everyone's sort of like, there's that unity. Everyone's working towards a common cause. And specifically in Edmonton, there's been loads of activism to work on police reform just in our city. Because, of course, we want to defund the police, but that's very difficult to get done.
Yeah.
But we've managed to take, I think, 11% of the budget away from the police so far.
Okay.
And so it's nice to see that our hard work is actually paying off. And so we're going to the town hall meetings, we're signing petitions, writing emails, writing letters. And it's nice because it is giving everyone something to do that everyone else is also doing. And so it makes quarantine and self-isolation less isolating.
Yeah, like now there's at least a purpose and a way to spend this time that could possibly be helpful. Do you think the way that you describe your relationship with social media has changed since lockdown and then since the Black Lives Matter movement started?
Prior to March, I primarily use Instagram, and it was basically just a way for me to check on updates for my friends and people I'm interested in, just to like check what people are doing. And then when quarantine started, then it was just something mindless to do, to just give me that instant dopamine. And then I would feel terrible the second I would get off the app, because it was like, oh my God, I just wasted 3 hours looking at weird pictures of dogs.
Yeah, right.
Like I just spent half an hour cyber stalking this girl I had a crush on in junior high.
But now you got updates on her, and that's
I have updates on her.
Yeah.
I know what she's up to.
There you go.
And then once Black Lives Matter really took off, then Instagram has become just like a political minefield where you never really know exactly what you're going to see, but also a way to see lots of inspirational work done by amazing activists, a way to lift up Black voices, and a way to connect with others who share the same goal, and lots of people to support, lots of ways to support, like from Canada, where before we had protests starting, there was nothing we could really do. And so then it was like petitions, the videos you could watch that donated ad revenue, places to donate to. And so Instagram has really become like a powerhouse for the Black Lives Matter movement. Yeah. And then it's nice to like look at everyone's story and then see what they're posting about Black Lives Matter and how they're interacting with it. And then it gives you a bit of an insight about what your friends really think about other people.
It absolutely does. I've noticed that as well. And I mean, I think you put it really well. I think like a way to sum up how it's changed is like social media used to be really mindless, and now all of a sudden it's become so mindful. It's like this educational tool now. Before it was entertainment, and we needed it and we liked it, you know, fine.
Yeah.
I wanted nothing more from it. I was happy looking at Instagram every day, checking, see what people are doing. Fine, great. And now all of a sudden it's this like incredibly educational tool. It's pretty remarkable.
I'll wake up in the morning and I'll scroll through Instagram and I'll catch myself thinking like, oh my God, I'm so tired of hearing about this. And then I'm like, that's a problem. I shouldn't be tired about, I can't be tired about hearing this, because first off, I'm white and I have all of this privilege. And the fact that I'm allowed to be tired of this and wish for it to go away is a symptom of my privilege.
Yeah.
And so just things like that have forced me to really interact with the privileges that I have in my life by being white, and just sort of unlearning a whole bunch of harmful thoughts that I didn't realize were harmful.
Same. I think before this, I always, you know, obviously I would categorize myself as somebody who wasn't racist. I did not even know about the term anti-racist before this movement. That's just one of the new areas of my mind and areas of our history that I've explored now because of this. It's something that I've learned, and it's really important. What have you learned about white supremacy? What have you learned about white privilege? What have you learned about racism in the past since May 25th?
Something that was confusing for a while was about the Black Power raised fist. And I've read some places that like white people shouldn't do it, and other places where white people should do it. And so I had to do a whole bunch of research to figure out whether or not I'm allowed to do that when I go to protests.
What was the consensus that you read?
Based off of the history of it, it started off not as a Black Power symbol, but then it was adapted as a Black Power symbol, and then white supremacy groups tried to take it as a white power symbol. And so then if a white person does it, then it can be misconstrued as a white power symbol.
That's incredibly helpful to know.
Yeah. So I've just avoided that because I don't want to like burden my Black friends with educating me and telling me what to do. So it can be hard to keep up with, but I am trying my best, because I feel like as a white person, I don't get a say in any of this. It's my job to just listen, my job to collect as many facts as possible, and then uplift BIPOC voices the best I can. And
I think we've got to make room for it to be messy, because the issues that we are addressing and that we're opening our eyes to are the messiest possible issues that anyone can even fathom. So of course the rage, the swell of feelings and emotions that like come up when we're trying to sort this out and educate each other, it's gonna be messy.
Exactly.
2020 so far for you, what has been, if you could draw a frame around a scene of like your lowest point, what was happening? What did that look like? What did that feel like? What were your thoughts?
That's a hard one. Because you know, like when you feel terrible, it feels like you've always felt terrible. You always will feel terrible. And this is your new reality. And this is how it's always going to be.
Truest statement ever. Yeah.
And with emotions, oftentimes that happens. Like when you're feeling terrible, it's the strongest. But even when you're feeling happy, it's just, this is what I'm living in. It's not going to change, and emotions feel permanent at the time.
Yeah.
Even though everything has an impermanence to it. It's very hard to recognize that.
Last question. What has been the biggest gift about all of the upheaval in 2020 for you? Silver lining, takeaway?
The first thing that comes to mind is that I've been able to essentially be able to live with my boyfriend, because both of us, I'm 19, he's 18, and we both live with our families for the moment because we're not financially stable enough to move out. But because we've been allowed to go back and forth, it's sort of alleviated a lot of anxiety, where it's like I could actually I can live with him. Like I can do this, and our communication has just gotten so much better in so little time. And our relationship has just improved so much because neither of us feel restricted in expressing our emotions, whether that be like happiness or even annoyance or anger at each other, because like we've spent all this time together, we've been through this horrible thing together, and it's not so much a trauma bond as we've sort of been viewing it as like a test drive for our future relationship.
A common thread I have picked up in these conversations is that it's a time of showing us what's possible, things that we didn't have time to practice before, we the circumstances didn't allow for, and now it's like, oh, I can do that. Interesting, good to know.
There are some things about quarantine and lockdown that I hope will stay when we go back to normal. One of them is sanitizing everything after someone touches it. I love that.
Yeah.
And then also just the way that like we use Zoom now, and it's so much more accessible for people who can't leave their homes because of disabilities or like mental health issues.
Yeah.
And I don't know, I like that.
I like that too. And actually on that note, just really quick, one more question. What's something that you're really looking forward to being able to do again? Like the one thing, and it can be something silly too.
I want to go to a coffee shop, and I also want to go to a bar. I don't even know if I don't really care about the drinks at either places. I just want to go to the spaces and feel the atmosphere.
Yeah, I've been missing weird stuff that I wasn't even into before. Like I had a craving a couple weeks ago specifically to be in a sports bar. I hate that shit. Like I don't like it, but like it just feels like a nostalgic, like remember sports bars?
Yeah, I like a couple weeks ago I was like, God damn, if I wouldn't do anything to go to IKEA.
The meatballs.
I don't need any furniture. I just
meatballs, baby.
Yeah.
I know, just be in that atmosphere. IKEA feels like an amusement park in my mind right now.
Yeah.
I know exactly.
It's like this magical place.
It's going to bring us back to maybe a lot more gratitude when the world opens again.
For sure. And I'm looking forward to that because the world could use a bit more gratitude.
Oof. That is definitely the truth. All right. Well, have a beautiful evening, and we will be in touch.
Yeah, you as well. Thank you so much.
Of course. Thank you.
Bye.